care, more demand for food stamps. That will put enormous strains on the federal budget as well as the state budget. So the most important thing we can do for our budget crisis right now is to make sure that the economy doesn't continue to tank. And that's why passing the economic recovery plan is the right thing to do. Even though I recognize that it's expensive. The latest on President Obama, the new administration and other news from Washington and around the nation. Look, I would love not to have to spend money right now. This notion that somehow I came in here just ginned up to spend $800 billion. That wasn't how I envisioned my presidency beginning. But we have to adapt to existing circumstances. Now, what we are going to also have to do is to make sure that as soon as the economy stabilizes, investment begins again, we're no longer contracting, but we're growing, that our midterm and long-term budget is dealt with. And I think the same is true for individual consumers. Right now, they're just trying to figure out how do I make sure that if I lose my job, I'm still going to be able to make my mortgage payments. Or they're worried about, how am I going to pay next month's bills? So they're not engaging in a lot of long-term financial planning. Once the economy stabilizes and people are less fearful, then I do think that we're going to have to start thinking about how do we operate more prudently, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. So if you want to buy a house, then putting zero down and buying a house that is probably not affordable for you in case something goes wrong, that's something that has to be reconsidered. So we're going to have to change our bad habits. But right now, the key is making sure that we pull ourselves out of the economic slump that we're in. All right. Juliana Goldman, Bloomberg. Question. Thank you, Mr. President. Many experts, from Nouri El-Rubani to Senator Schumer, have said that it will cost the government more than $1 trillion to really fix the financial system. During the campaign, you promised the American people that you won't. Just tell them what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. Won't the government need far more than the $350 billion that's remaining in the financial rescue fund to really solve the credit crisis? Mr. Obama, well, the credit crisis is real. And it's not over. I mean, we averted catastrophe by passing the TARP legislation. But as I said before, because of a lack of clarity and consistency in how it was applied. A lack of oversight in how the money went out, we didn't get as a big of a bang for the buck as we should have. My immediate task is making sure that the second half of that money, $350 billion, is spent properly. That's my first job. Before I even think about what else I've got to do, my first task is to make sure that my Secretary of the Treasury Tim Gaithner, working with Larry Summers, my national economic advisor. And others, are coming up with the best possible plan to use this money wisely, in a way that's transparent. In a way that provides clear oversight, that we are conditioning any money that we give to banks on them. Reducing executive compensation to reasonable levels and to make sure that they're not wasting that money. We are going to have to work with the banks in an effective way to clean up there. Balance sheet so that some trust is restored within the marketplace. Because right now part of the problem is that nobody really knows what's on the bank's books. Any given bank, they're not sure what kinds of losses are there. We've got to open things up and restore some trust. We also have to deal with the housing issue in a clear and consistent way. I don't want to preempt my Secretary of the Treasury. He's going to be laying out these principles in great detail tomorrow. But my instruction to him has been, let's get this right. Let's create a template in which we're restoring market confidence. And the reason that's so important is because we don't know yet whether we're going to. Need additional money, or how much additional money we'll need until we've seen how successful. We are at restoring a sense of confidence in a marketplace that the federal government and the Federal Reserve Bank and the FDIC, working in concert, know what they're doing. The latest on President Obama, the new administration, and other news from Washington and around the nation. That can make a big difference, in terms of whether or not we attract private capital back into the marketplace. and ultimately the government cannot substitute for all. The private capital that has been withdrawn from the system. We've got to restore confidence, so that private capital goes back in. Okay. Jake. Question, thank you, Mr. President. My question follows Juliana's in content. The American people have seen hundreds of billions of dollars spent already. And still the economy continues to free fall. Beyond avoiding the national catastrophe that you've warned about, once all the legs of your stool are in place. Mr. Obama, right. Question, how can the American people gauge whether or not your programs are working? Should they be looking at the metric of the stock market, home foreclosures, unemployment? What metric should they use? When? And how will they know? If it's working or whether or not we need to go to a plan B. Mr. Obama, I think my initial measure of success is creating or saving 4 million jobs. That's bottom line number one, because if people are working, then they've got enough confidence to make purchases, to make investments. Businesses start seeing that consumers are out there with a little more confidence. And they start making investments, which means they start hiring workers. So step number one, job creation. Step number 2, are we seeing the credit markets operate effectively? You know, I can't tell you how many businesses that I talk to that are successful businesses but just can't get credit. Part of the problem in Elkhart that I heard about today was the fact that this is the RV capital of America. You've got a bunch of RV companies that have customers who want to purchase RVs. But even though their credit is good, they can't get the loan. Now, the businesses also can't get loans to make payments to their suppliers. But when they have consumers, consumers can't get the loans that they need. So normalizing the credit markets is, I think, step number 2. Step number 3 is going to be housing. Have we stabilized the housing market? Now, you know, the federal government doesn't have complete control over that. But if our plan is effective, working with the Federal Reserve Bank, working with the FDIC, I think what we can do is stem the rate of foreclosure and we can start stabilizing housing values over time. And the biggest measure of success is whether we stop contracting and shedding jobs. And we start growing again. Now, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, and as I said, this is an unprecedented crisis. But my hope is that after a difficult year, and this year is going to be a difficult year, that businesses start investing again. They start making decisions that, you know, in fact, there's money to be made out there. Customers or consumers start feeling that their jobs are stable and safe, and they start making purchases again. And if we get things right then, starting next year, we can start seeing some significant improvement. Ed Henry. Where's Ed? CNN. There he is. Question, thank you, Mr. President. You promised to send more troops to Afghanistan. And since you've been very clear about a timetable to withdraw our combat troops from Iraq within 16 months. I wonder what's your timetable to withdraw troops eventually from Afghanistan? The latest on President Obama, the new administration and other news from Washington and around the nation. And related to that, there's a Pentagon policy that bans media coverage. Of the flag-draped coffins from coming into Dover Air Force Base. And back in 2004, then Senator Joe Biden said that it was shameful for dead soldiers to be quote, snuck back into the country under the cover of night. You promised unprecedented transparency, openness in your government. Will you overturn that policy, so the American people can see the full human cost of war? Mr. Obama, your question is timely. We got reports that 4 American service members have been killed in Iraq today. And you know, obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to the families. I've said before that, you know, people have asked me, when did it hit you that you are now president? And what I told them was the most sobering moment is signing letters to the families of our fallen heroes. It reminds you of the responsibilities that you carry in this office and the consequences of decisions that you make.